Always true.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
It is a world full of crises. In Syria, after 4 years of war, a staggering death toll, perhaps as high as 300,000. The wider region destabilised, with ISIL using the most brutal tactics to control huge parts of Iraq and Syria. In the aftermath of the Arab Spring, other nations like Libya and Yemen now look close to becoming failed states. And it's not just the Middle East. In Africa, conflicts continue to rage as deaths mount from Ebola in the west of the continent. And in Europe, the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, one directly involving one of the world's superpowers, Russia. Overall, the world is struggling to cope with more refugees on Earth than at any time since the formation of the United Nations. So how should the UN and the international community respond? Today on Talk to Al Jazeera, our guest is the man who heads the UN and is in effect the leader of that international community. Nearing the end of his 10-year term, we ask Ban Ki-moon about his leadership and the vast challenges facing the world.
Secretary General, you have been the world's top diplomat for the last 8 years. You've got 2 more years to go. Some would say it's an impossible task, constantly travelling, constantly mediating, dealing with so many different crises around the world. Do you enjoy this job?
It's not the matter of enjoy or not enjoy. This is a mandate which I have been given by the United Nations, by international community. I try to address all the issues as much as I can. I'm really exerting my best efforts. I put always the public service first rather than my private enjoyment or private life. I am trying to motivate myself to do as much as I can deliver to many needy people.
There are so many needy people. In fact, apparently 78 million people around the world in need of humanitarian assistance. We have more people displaced, i.e. forced from their homes, than any time since World War II. When you go out and sometimes you meet these refugees, what do you think, not just as Secretary General, but as a father and as a grandfather?
I have seen so many people who are extremely poor and very sick in the refugee camps, displaced persons and sick people in the hospitals. Whenever I see them, I'm just humbled how and what I can do as a Secretary General, how I can help them. I believe still that if people show generous support and solidarity, we can lift billions of people out of poverty. We can help tens of millions of people who are sick. We can provide the necessary support.
Now, one of those biggest problems is Syria. Back in the 1990s, when we had the genocide in Rwanda, when we had the killings in Srebrenica, the world said never again. But it is happening again right now in Syria, isn't it, Secretary General?
I am extremely worried and concerned about what has been happening in Syria. It's going to be soon 5th year in the Syrian tragedy. Half of the population, that is more than 11 million people, have been affected either way. We have more than 3.8 million Syrian refugees who are being accommodated in the neighboring countries. It's a totally unacceptable situation. The parties are still fighting. We are now trying to find and expand the political space as much as possible. My special envoy, Mr. de Mistura, has been really working very hard.
Secretary General, you said repeatedly, and I've heard you say it, we need a political solution. one of the things you need to get a political solution is unity of the Security Council, and yet there is no unity on this issue. Do you think world leaders, and particularly those that sit on the Security Council, should hang their heads in shame on this issue?
We have seen many cases whenever the permanent members of the Security Council are united, we can deliver immediately very successfully. In the case of destruction of chemical weapons of Syria, we were able to deliver it in a relatively short period of time. That means the unity really delivered. When it comes to political issues, Security Council is still divided.
So your message to them now?
I'm asking the leaders of the world, particularly Security Council, should be united. What we see in Ukraine, that's again very sad and tragic. Why these people, just they don't have anything wrong for them, they have to suffer in this cold weather, and there's a total destruction of their society. I'm appalled by all this brutality and the destructiveness of the society by human act.
Getting back to Syria, you've mentioned the men you've had as your special envoys, some of the most distinguished diplomats in the world. Mr. de Mistura trying now to work on this freeze plan for Aleppo, but he doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. Now, some diplomats are saying to me, this is going to be your legacy. Perhaps you should step up and yourself get directly involved.
I'm ready to do whatever and whenever is necessary. Of course, I have a full confidence in diplomatic skill and wisdom of de Mistura. He's been really trying to expand the political space through Aleppo ceasefire freeze. We have a little bit room now, but I'm making quite clear that this is not a substitute for political process. We just want to have a pause and try to find some political space through this pause of violence.
Just to be clear, Secretary General, you said there that there's a little bit of room. My understanding from what I'm hearing from people is that the Syrian government is opposed to a freeze in Aleppo.
He had met President Assad 2-3 times discussing this matter, and they have shown some good understandings on the concept of Aleppo freeze. But it requires other parties, particularly the opposition forces, they are not still coming to this idea. So he's still working very hard.
The other thing that has developed in Syria and in Iraq is ISIL. It is an enemy that you are facing that is beheading people, burning people alive, an enemy that is not a state yet controls more territory than many states. How do you fight an enemy like that?
We have to unite. It's true that it's clear that Daesh, ISIL, have committed unspeakable crime, brutality. I'm just appalled. I cannot describe the horror myself, how a human being can be so cruel. In the case of burning alive this Jordanian pilot, this is, I cannot believe how this can happen by a human being. And I'm also very sorry about what had happened to 2 Japanese journalists. But they are not all. We have seen so many people who have been executed, beheaded. We have to stop this in the name of humanity, in the name of whole world. We have to mobilize all resources and the influence to stop this. And this narrative of hatred is unbelievably horrifying. Therefore, I'm asking all the countries and people who have influence and resources and capacity to stop this one. At the same time, we have to address the root causes. Military means may be effective, but that cannot solve all the problems. We have to address what are the root causes of these crimes and hate. That is why we have to work harder to enhance the level of tolerance and mutual respect and understanding among the different group of culture and faith and religions. But at the same time, I'm making sure that this is not the war against any religion. There should not be anything about religion. They should not misuse this one. Yeah.
When you look at the Middle East right now, Secretary General, you look at Syria, Iraq, you look at the neighbours of Syria, they're all suffering. You look at other countries like Libya and Yemen, they're failing, some would say already failed states. You have ongoing violence in Bahrain, you have a repressive regime in Egypt. Looking back 4 years, was the Arab Spring a good thing or a bad thing for the people of the region?
Arab Spring itself should be a good one. It started with the real aspiration, on the basis of real aspirations of people on the ground who really wanted to have a human dignity and freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. These are basic fundamental goals and principles of democracy and human rights. Now, Tunisia has been able to show their own progress through 2 consecutive presidential elections. Yemen started well with national dialogue and transitional plan. I'm deeply worried about what is happening now in Yemen. My special advisor for Yemen, Jamal Ben-Omar, is really working, speaking to both sides, particularly with Houthis. I hope we'll be able to make some progress of this. First of all, calming down the stability there. And in other parts of the Arab, particularly in Libya, my special advisor, again, envoy, Mr. Leon, has been able to convene the meetings, and I'm expecting to have another meeting in Libya very soon. As you know, I myself visited Libya in last October, and I met the representatives of 2 sides, and I got assurances from them, the 2 parties, is a lack of confidence and mutual trust. I hope that this time they will be able to agree mutually agreeable solutions.
Of course, Secretary General, the longest running conflict is the Israel-Palestine conflict. And we seem to have had a pattern that's developed well before you became Secretary General of talks from time to time brokered by the US, then a devastating war, then more talks that don't go anywhere, and all the time Israeli settlements on Palestinian land. Do we need a new approach now?
Last week and this week, I have met and spoken to leaders of Palestine and Prime Minister Netanyahu. And I have been urging both leaders to resolve all these issues and sit down together and address fundamental underlying problems, so that we will be able to see the harmonious resolution of this issue. This Israeli and Palestinian peace can be a core issue of a Middle East peace process. I'm urging again that the 2 sides really refrain maximum from provoking the others and try to create an atmosphere politically conducive so that they can be able to return to the dialogue table. There is no other alternatives but to dialogue. That's what I have been urging to the leaders of 2 parties.
When you're dealing with so many of these conflicts, can I examine for a moment your way of working? I am told you are at your desk sometimes at 4 a.m. and you're still working sometimes at midnight. You're constantly in the air, you're constantly taking phone calls. But at the same time, I'm told the way you prefer to work is behind the scenes, quiet diplomacy. Do you think sometimes you should be a bit tougher, a bit more forthright in what you say and call people out?
There are many different ways of addressing certain issues. Whenever it is necessary, I have been speaking out publicly. I have been really challenging the leaders in the face of them. And in many cases, I've been really trying to have a very personal relationship and personal dialogue with the leaders, so that I really wanted to give them certain examples of my own experience and my own wisdoms, so that they would take my ideas as their policies, rather than being forced by the outsiders. There are many leaders who would feel it sort of humiliation when they are dictated by the outside forces, outside people. That is why I've been really trying to use the behind the scenes or quiet diplomacy. But it's not that I'm always using quiet diplomacy.
Well, can I give you a case in point? And the leader in question is Vladimir Putin. For the first time, almost a year ago, a piece of European territory was annexed, Crimea. The first time that one state has annexed a piece of territory in Europe since the 1930s. Shouldn't you have been tougher on President Putin for what he did?
I have met him 2 or 3 times in person on this Ukrainian situation. I have been speaking over the phones many times. I have been really personally, very sincerely speaking to him, advising him to really address all this issue by sitting together with the parties concerned.
But let's be quite clear for our viewers on the UN position. Crimea is still in Ukraine, yes?
The General Assembly has made it quite clear in their resolution.
So then Russia is in Crimea illegally, yes?
All these issues on Crimea should be guided by the United Nations General Assembly resolution.
So, we know the resolution. The resolution said that referendum of March the 16th had no validity. So, Russia is illegally in Crimea, yes?
Yeah, I'm again, asking you to be guided by this General Assembly resolution.
But you're being very careful with your words, Secretary General, and I wonder why you're not tougher on Russia. Is this because you want to keep a channel of negotiation open to President Putin, or is it because you don't want to upset a permanent member of the UN Security Council?
It's not a matter of upset a certain member state of the United Nations. I'm speaking on the basis of my principle. Then the member states of the United Nations have made it quite clear in their General Assembly resolution. So that's why I'm referring to this. Yeah.
Secretary General, I hope you don't mind me telling people, you are 70 years old. In a few months' time, the UN will also be 70 years old. Does it not now need urgent reform? This was a body that was set up. In fact, as we're talking, it's the 70th anniversary of the Yalta Conference, where that veto and the permanent members were first decided on. Is it right that the victors of World War II have a veto on everything in this organisation, including reform of it?
There is a widely shared feeling and understanding and wish among the member states that considering the dramatic changes in political and social situations during the last 70 years, the Security Council should be changed in a more democratic, representative, the transparent way. There is almost consensus views about
this. Well, apart
this.
from 5 nations who quite like it the way it is.
The problem is that what kind of modality they should find. On these modalities, member states may have to continue to discuss among themselves. That's my firm view that when Security Council is more representative, more effective, then we can deliver much better and resolve all this current crisis much easier way.
Would you have liked to have reform of the system by this 70th birthday? Because clearly you're not going to get it.
I'm sure that many member states will want to discuss this matter on the occasion of celebrating 70th birthday of the United Nations.
Of course, there are other important issues you're going to be working on this 70th anniversary. Tell me about those and the challenges that you hope to meet in the coming last 2 years of your job as Secretary General.
First of all, year 2015 is the most crucial year for United Nations and for international community. First of all, we have to accelerate our efforts to meet the target of Millennium Development Goals. And secondly, I expect the world leaders will shape and agree on a sustainable future development agenda with a set of sustainable development goals. And lastly, we have to agree and adopt the climate change agreement by December this year. These are three top priorities. Of course, we have to have a successful meeting in Addis Ababa in July to agree on a very robust financial and supporting mechanisms for sustainable development as well as climate change. I will do my best to help member states agree on these achieve all these three priorities. I have 2 more years to go as the Secretary General of the United Nations. I will spare no efforts until last day of my mandate to make this world better for all, where nobody will be left behind. That's the world where we can claim that we are living in a harmonious world.
On that crucial climate change treaty, what do you think are the chances of success?
With the climate change summit meeting, which I convened September last year, there is a hugely encouraging support, and I believe that momentum has been created. We have to build upon this momentum. December last year in Lima, Peru, the member states have agreed call for climate action, and they have established the draft text for the first time in 20 years in the negotiation. I sincerely hope that the member states will be more ambitious and present their commitment contribution by either March or June, so that by December in Paris we'll be able to agree this.
You are optimistic?
I'm optimistic that I have seen and felt during my meeting in Davos Forum last month that government leaders and business communities and civil societies, I think that they are much more united, and they believe that this climate change must be addressed in collaboration among three-party partnership: government leaders and business leaders and civil societies.
Secretary General, you've talked about those challenges that you face in 2 more years. When you finish, and you have been a fixture on the world stage for so long, what are you going to do next? Because there are persistent reports that perhaps you're going to then move to another political role and try and be the president of your own country, South Korea. Is that an option?
I will continue to focus my mandate on my mandate as the Secretary General of the United Nations, addressing the peace and security issues and development and human rights. And I will continue to focus my time and exert all my time and energy until my last day.
So are you going to keep us guessing about your next job, or are you ruling out those rumors about the South Korean president?
No, I don't have any time at this time to think any other things than my current job as a Secretary General.
The reason persistently people ask about this is that your job is one beyond national political ambition, and some may question some of your judgments if it's thought that you have ambition for another post in your own country.
Well, I'm just repeating that I will focus and I will be very faithfully committed to my role as a Secretary General until the last day of my job.
Secretary General. We will be following every twist and turn of your last 2 years, as we always do here on Al Jazeera. Thank you, Secretary General, for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you.